Buckle up, kids. You. Buckle up, kids. You are in the place to be reviews. I am Pete, right here with you. Etepwakuians, the place to be reviews, no doubt. We are on IGN.com covering this article, and this was requested of me by listener of the podcast and friend of the channel, Chris Wicks. And right now, how Marvel's first gay movie superhero can be a success. Buckle up, kids. This is going to be a fun ride. By David Opie. Although Marvel Studios has proven to be the most successful movie franchise of all time, they still have room to grow, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus representation. Queer characters have appeared before in Marvel Cinematic Universe TV shows like Runaway and Jessica Jones, neither of which I have ever watched. But it wasn't until the release of Avengers Endgame they were actually acknowledged in Marvel's movies when a mourner recounted his same-sex date. And that was a very brief moment. It was acknowledged, and I think it was well overblown. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter if the character's gay, straight, whatever. I rely on the strength of the story and the development of the character, and then that would be an afterthought of what the character actually stands for. It's a personality trait, or a character trait. But it doesn't have to be it can be a part of who they are. Obviously, it's a big part of who they are. But it doesn't need to define their entire character and be at the forefront of everything that they do. So it goes on to say, even the brief inclusion of one gay character didn't make up for all the times Marvel didn't seize the opportunity to express the queerness of other LGBT blah blah characters on the big screen. Loki, Valkyrie, Io, and even Korg have enjoyed queer relationships in the comics. Enjoyed. But you wouldn't know that from watching any of Marvel's movies. While Loki and Korg haven't expressed a sexuality of any kind in the movies, both Valkyrie and Io were denied the chance to do so, and scenes portraying them as queer were cut from Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther before final release. I don't really need to see Korg. Valkyrie and Io, whatever. That doesn't, it doesn't matter to me. Valkyrie was pretty badass in Thor Ragnarok. I like her, the character. I don't really care for the actress's politics. She falls from that Brie Larson tree, and I'm not really too fond of her politics, obviously, when it comes to her representation. Because, yes, while it matters, like I said, this whole thing about you need queer actors to play queer roles, you do, but if a straight actor plays a queer role or a queer actor plays a straight role, it doesn't really matter as long as it's well written and the actor fits the role and fits what the character is and can perform the task of making the audience believe that character. Then that's what should matter first. One of my most notable examples of this is Neil Patrick Harris on How I Met Your Mother as Barney Stinson. He played the biggest womanizer there was, and he's, a married gay man. So, if you'll excuse me while I sip my coffee. As it has been a long day, and we have a long night ahead of us here at the channel. Fortunately, it looks like things might change soon for the better. After refusing to acknowledge queerness for over a decade, Marvel stalwarts like the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige are now reassuring fans that proper LGBTQ representation is finally on the way, with success stories featuring diverse heroes like Captain Marvel and Black Panther under their belt. Marvel is better equipped than ever to finally help queer fans see themselves represented in their heroes. What will this consist of exactly remains to be seen, but representation matters, so it's important that Marvel get this right. And if you understand why representation is so important for other people, chances are there's already been a character introduced in the MCU who you find yourself closely identifying with. Fortunately, there are plenty of lessons to be taken from Marvel's comics, which started grappling with queerness long before Iron Man was a glint in Robert Downey Jr.'s eye. Um, I know there's been gay comic characters through the years, and see, I don't really read the comics though, so and I think if they were more prominent characters and relevant to what the MCU is, they would have already been portrayed on the screen. But in the case of Valkyrie and Io, I can see Korg, whatever. But Korg hasn't been that big of a part to even warrant that much. But I don't know. I mean, what do you want to see him and Meek together? I have no idea what you want. Do show queerness on screen. I love how they're like telling you, well, now these are the steps you need to take. Since X-Force members Richter and Shatterstar shared a kiss in 2009's X Factor 45, the door's been open to explore the queer heroes. Okay, this kind of queerness, I'm just going to kind of skip through this here because this is a really long article. This kind of queerness hasn't been present in the movies thus far. If Marvel is really going to introduce a proper LGBT alphabet representation, it's important that they show, don't tell. Heterosexual heroes shared multiple kisses across Marvel's filmography. A lot of it's because it made sense to the story and they were involved in a relationship. If there was a gay character and, they cite Tony and Pepper and Steve and Peggy. Okay, well, Tony and Pepper's story spans not only the Iron Man movies, but also the Avengers movies, and Steve and Peggy's story is represented all the way back to the beginning of Captain America. So these are long-standing relationships, and you're stacking up things that you want included now that are nowhere near as relevant to a main story, and you're stacking that up against Tony and Pepper and Steve and Peggy. Okay. Well, there's your problem right there. You're putting the horse before the cart and comparing apples to oranges with your demands and your wants. So reconsider that. Don't take too long to show this queerness. Do involve queer talent. And this just goes along with what I'm talking about in casting decisions. Like that's... I understand but the actor has to fit the role. You can't just cast somebody because they are a member of the LGBT community into a role that they're not suited for, they don't fit, and it's not going to help advance the story, your movie, and your brand. That goes along with to involve queer talent. Don't stereotype queer characters. Well, that just goes without saying. I mean, you don't have to make them flamboyantly gay or, act a certain way, whatever like that, like a parody of themselves just to get your point across that they're gay. It can be subtle or it can be a part of their, they can have a relationship, whatever. Represent them properly. But first and foremost, make the character make sense. Do acknowledge the LGBTQ spectrum. This is where it kind of loses me. The gender fluid stuff. Yeah. I don't really want to get into this too much, but if you're bisexual, whatever, that's, it is, your choices are your choices. I really don't think you need to have a kind of sex ed on gender spectrum in a Marvel movie, though. Just to kind of summarize my thoughts on that briefly. Don't sideline or kill queer. Don't sideline or kill queer characters unnecessarily. No, that just goes without saying. And that was a complaint that they faced in The Walking Dead years ago about killing off all the black characters. But now the cast is way more diverse, and the diversity that was kind of injected into The Walking Dead over the years, it hasn't been seemed forced or kind of ham-fisted. It's just been gradual, and as they meet new people, there's different groups of people who've all gathered in these different areas. So it just made sense on the show. And Angela Kang, the new showrunner, has done a wonderful job of writing these female characters, and there's been the LGBTQ characters on The Walking Dead, and I think there are now, and I think they've been properly represented. Magna and Yumiko being the most prevalent. I don't mind it. They're good characters, and they were in the comics too, and that's one thing that they've done right. And I think that Marvel could do this right, but they can't take the side of these SJWs who want this, to change everything, much like Victoria Alonso, who is a producer at Marvel, and she has said that she wants the X-Men name is outdated and it's time for a change. And my joke and comment was, are you going to change it to the X-Whammon? Where do you stop with this? Where does the train track end with this level of absurdity? We are truly in clown world. Honk honk. I just can't even. And like I said, I have nothing against representation, but just make it done properly. And the fact that you're saying that, well, there's been straight relationships and there's been hetero relationships all this time. It's our time now. Well, you don't, and this goes both ways, and this kind of plays back to Brie Larson when she said she didn't want to take seats away from the table. They just want to add more. Well, okay, if you want to add seats at the table for the LGBTQ community, we're not taking away straight relationships or hetero relationships, obviously, and the entire playing field doesn't need to change for this. They're additions. You don't need, because you have 12 straight superheroes, you don't automatically need 12 LGBTQ superheroes. I mean, that's not, and to say that's proper representation, it's not, because every demographic that you're in, not every ethnicity, race, and gender or sexual preference is represented everywhere. So it varies by story. It goes back to the complaints about lack of, ethnic representation in certain movies or games that are based in time periods. You can't even argue that, because those time periods and the area that those stories may have taken place in, there may have not been all ethnicities represented. It would be like complaining about there not being enough black people in Fiddler on the Roof. It doesn't make sense at all. So it's a non-valid argument. But I'm not making light of this situation here, as I feel there can be a level of inclusion, absolutely. But just make it make sense, make it cohesive. Don't push that to the forefront just in the name of corporate virtue signaling and identity politics, which is where a lot of these IPs are going. As we know, Star Wars and now the MCU. And we'll talk more about some MCU Phase 4 news and some goodies out of a episode of my podcast that Monica and I recorded with Loudy, episode 34 of the Place to Be Reviews. So this has been how Marvel's first case movie superhero can be a success. I am Etep Wakuian. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below. The podcast can be found on Anchor, Spotify, and iTunes, The Place to Be Reviews. We are on Twitter at The Place to Be RE1. You can send me an email, theplacetobereviews@mail.com. We have a Facebook page. Of course we do, The Place to Be Reviews. I am Pete, and I will catch you on the flip side.